As usual, his parents came to our dacha. In the evening everyone gathered around the table, and they sent us outside to play. August nights in Yakutia are dark, and my brother and I played in the yard, lit by the bright moon. We played hide and seek. That time it was me who was the seeker. My brother hid well. I was looking for him for a long time, and suddenly I heard a strange sound in the currant bushes, as if someone sighed heavily and sadly. I immediately realized that it was Boria, as always, trying to scare me, and shouted, "Boris, come out, I know you're there." Boris really responded, but behind me, in a completely different place. Intrigued, I took the stick, went over to the bush and poked it lightly with the stick. From behind the bush, in the moonlight, an oval wrinkled face of a white-yellow hue peeked out. It looked hideous, its eye sockets empty, its mouth wet and without teeth, its lips cracked like an old man's. I was horrified. It was so wild and creepy that even after 12 years the thought of that creature still gives me the creeps. When I came to my senses, I ran home as fast as I could, sobbing. It took me a long time to recover from what had happened. My parents thought it was my brother's work and scolded Boria. But I knew for sure it wasn't him. That night, when everyone was asleep, I tossed and turned on my bed unable to sleep for a long time. Lying in my room, which was on the second floor, I heard under the window the heavy sighs of the creature. This happened to my uncle from Yakutia. He lives in the countryside and works as a teacher. One fall, he and a friend decided to go duck hunting. They chose a distant place, about 50 kilometers from the village. Having submitted his teaching hours, he walked to the arranged lake in the afternoon. The autumn sky was quickly darkening and getting colder. The friend still hadn't arrived. As it turned out later, he had been urgently called away for work in the neighboring village, and had to leave without warning my uncle. In the excitement of the hunt, Uncle did not notice that it was already evening, and a light drizzle began to fall. Uncle decided to go to an old, abandoned hut on the edge of a forest to take cover. He decided to spend the night there as well and go back in the morning. He kindled a fire in the stove, ate, then got into his sleeping bag and began to get ready for sleep, when suddenly, out of the blue, uneasiness began to creep into his consciousness. Lying in the sack, my uncle did not notice when he fell asleep. He woke up because drops of water were falling on his face and his sleeping bag was damp. Opening his eyes, Uncle saw that he was not lying inside the hut, but outside in the rain. He ran inside the hut, very cold. Thinking that some abbess was playing a trick on him, he drank half a bottle of vodka at once for courage and went to bed, having first propped the flimsy door of the hut with a lock. And again, he fell into the arms of Morpheus. He woke up yet again, soaked through with rain, in the street. He swore and went stubbornly inside the building, relighted the fire in the stove, drank the rest of the vodka, took out his knife, and got into the wet sleeping bag. Deciding to wait for the trickster, pretending to be asleep. An hour goes by. From a dark corner, in the glow of smoldering embers, emerged the almost 2-meter-tall figure of a woman dressed in old Yakut clothes. Her hair was loose, her facial features were invisible, but in the light of the embers he could see her inhuman eyes, which were yellow in color. The uncle lay with his eyes half closed, neither dead nor alive. The woman came to him, took hold of his sleeping bag, and began to drag him outside. My uncle lay there pretending to be asleep. When the devil had disappeared, he grabbed all his things and retreated home, despite the hail and the darkness. A few years later, my uncle visited that lake again and looked into the hut. There were gunshot marks on the walls on the inside. Apparently, some hunter was attacked by this evil thing, and the hunter decided not to be ceremonious. Returning to the subject of Yakut shamans. As you know, in Yakut religion the mystical power of shamans is associated with numerous external elements. I have already spoken about the parent beast and the sacred place of dismemberment. Besides this, there is also the rather murky concept of Boran Mahan, shaman tree, that is, an ordinary tree that is somehow associated with the shaman. I cannot say unequivocally what it is, because each source pushes its own version. Whether it's a tree where the shaman encapsulates some of his power, so that if anything he can restore energy from it, as a backup. Or whether it is just a tree where the parent beast nests, in case it is a bird. Or whether it is some kind of special achievement, which is unique to predatory shamans, and white shamans look at it as a bullshit. Anyways, I don't know. All we know is that the shaman tree is usually not some special tree, that is, it does not reach a huge size, is not covered with a black crust, and is located far away in the wilds, not standing out in the forest. It felt like the shamans were trying to hide their tree as best they could and make it inconspicuous, not to show it off to anyone. Such a purely utilitarian artifact. And it is believed that shaman tree retain mystical properties even after the death of the shaman. By the way, the shaman tree should not be confused with the karya I described in previous pasts. Karyak is just a revered tree through which travelers express their respect to local spirits, i.e. it has nothing to do with shamans. It was in Soviet times, somewhere in the 70s. It was autumn and a family went out to the woods to pick lingot/cowberries. Since the nearby places were all already developed by the villagers, our heroes decided to go deeper into the woods in the hope of stumbling upon a fertile place. They arrived in their Gazak on some fucking dirt road, got out and began to spread out. The head of the family, Alexei, also went looking for berries with a bucket. People shouted from time to time, as to not to get lost. They soon understood from the shouts that the place sucked as far as berries were concerned, and had to go and look for more somewhere else. Already about to go back to the car, Alexei decided to take a few more steps and sprung with joy. Under his feet, the ground was simply red with berries, and not just simple, but large, almost as big as plums. Alexei sat down, ran the bucket with the claws a couple of times under the berry bushes, and the bucket immediately became half full. Having shouted to his own to come to him as soon as possible, he began to collect berries with enthusiasm. The bucket was filled to the brim in about 5 minutes. Satisfied, he sat down to smoke, once again shouting something like, He sits, smokes, rejoices over his luck, and suddenly sees that a large tree grows nearby, in the heart of a fertile area. Well, the tree is big, old and branchy. Alexei was interested in that there was a hollow on a tree, and the head of some bird looked out from there. Alexei looks and looks, and the bird does not move. He stood up and looked more closely, and it turned out that it was not a real bird, but a handmade wooden tool in the shape of a bird. Alexei wondered where in a dense forest such a thing came from. He thought, and then realized that he wanted to piss. He didn't want to spoil the berries, so he peed on the same large tree. Then he squatted down and kept waiting for his friends. He waited and waited, no one came. He cried out again, Ma'ash, calling for his wife. This time he was answered, and the voice was very close, but he could not understand what his wife was saying. What? Alexei asked. The wife said something again, literally from behind the nearest trees, but again unintelligible, and there was no sign of her. Alexei called out to his son. Valera. No sooner was he silenced than right over his ear his son's voice muttered, I'm here, turn around. Alexei turned around, no one. Only the wooden bird seemed to change position and now looking directly at him. That's where our hero shat himself. Forgetting about the bucket and the berries, he rushed back in the direction of the car. He wandered for a long time through the woods, almost lost his way, but at last he heard his family members shouting and came out to them. He asked them why the fuck they didn't answer his call. His wife, son and daughter said that they did not hear any shouts, that he just stopped answering at some point and that they got worried and started looking for him. Alexei was ashamed of his panic and didn't tell them about the damn thing, he just said that he had found a very fertile place. Everyone became interested and went in search of that fabulous place. They walked back and forth for an hour, but they didn't find a fucking thing. He lost the bucket filled with berries, but what can you do? They decided to go to another place. Shortly after this incident, Alexei has developed a rash. Red, covering his whole body from face to heels, causing excruciating itching. He went to hospitals, doctors, and healers, all to no avail. By winter the rash was joined by a general weakness, Alexei could hardly get out of bed on his own. At last, on the advice of his friends, he called to him, a man from a nearby village, who had a reputation as a kind of a shaman. The man arrived, examined him, and said literally the following.
You broke the line somewhere, you went to a place you shouldn't have been, you did something you shouldn't have done.
He began to question him about what had happened to him over the past year. It was here that Alexei remembered the strange incident in the woods. The acting shaman was very interested in the incident and suggested that Alexei had stumbled upon a shaman tree and insulted it, maybe by immediately grabbing all the goods that grew under it, maybe by pissing on it, or maybe just by the tree itself being evil by default.
Either way,
he said,
you need to go to that place and find the tree and apologize to it, offering gifts.
Except that Alexei should look for that shaman tree alone. If he went there in company, he would never find it. And so, in the cold of January, the ailing Alexei tried to travel several times a week to a remote place and wander there in the middle of the winter woods. The trouble was that he could not remember the exact spot. and the fact that the shaman tree could even go to the astral plane and become invisible, too, did not make him very optimistic. Trying until the spring, went through the forest by the road length and breadth. And in spring he died of his strange illness and did not find that mysterious place. The shaman tree did not appear to him a second time. It did not forgive him. In the 17th century, there was a shaman in Yakutia. I've forgotten his name, and not a simple one, but a great one. According to the evidence of contemporaries and even later shamans, practically the greatest in the entire history of Yakutia. He did many epic deeds in his life, he did good, he did evil. In general, he left a big mark in the memory of the people. But in his old age he said that the time has come for him to die, or rather, to return to the source, to fly into his astral, Diabanakitor. And his will was. I feel that centuries from now there will come a time of great trials and accomplishments. And by that time, I will be ready to return to the middle world even more powerful. You will know that the time has come, somehow, but you will know. And then let one brave woman come to my grave and ride it at midnight. A big black spider will crawl out from under the grave. She will have to take it with her and throw it into the bowl of milk and drink it all. Then this woman would be pregnant with my new incarnation, and I shall yield again, and lead the Akut clan to the greatest heights. With these words the shaman died. A proper grave was built for him, buried and, naturally, soon forgotten. At the end of the 19th century a rumor ran through the village where there was a dilapidated shamanic grave. Supposedly at night people began to hear the heavy beats of the shaman's tambourine and see muddy wandering lights.
The old man is shamanizing, calling to himself, the time has come for him to be reborn.
People whispered. They remembered the legend of the will, chatted about it, and didn't do a fucking thing. Whether for the past 300 years brave women in the Akut villages have degenerated, or whether shamanic precepts are no longer taken so seriously, but there was not a single chick who would have gone to the grave at night and started eating a spider. For a long decade, right up to the turn of the 20th century, the shaman's grave remained restless. He kept calling for even the lowest horror. He didn't stick around though, it eventually just stopped. That's the epic fiasco of all the Akut people and the shaman personally. I remember a story from my childhood. It was told to me by 3 people who directly participated in the event, my 2 uncles and their mutual friend. I remember it very badly, and when I try to ask the storytellers again, they say, yes, there was something like that, but better forget it. So, if there are any inconsistencies in the narrative, don't blame them. I will still try to take a crack at it, and if anything, I will correct my narrative. Anyway, here it goes. When this trio were still kids, they and a few others liked to get together and go somewhere far away. They wandered into some woods. They were running there, having fun. They looked, there was an abandoned house. They approached it, looked around. It stands on a glade, old, dilapidated, door on one hinge, no glass in the windows, a typical small wooden house. There was no fence of any kind, or anything enclosing the plot. The house itself was also strange. There was only a table and a bench inside. No stove, no shelf, at least, an empty house. In corners, there were some feathers, small bones. In general it was clear that the house was uninhabited and there was no one in it for a long time. Well, the children frolic, playing hide and seek, and close to the evening they go away. Eventually they forget about the house and a couple of months later they suddenly remembered and decided to go there again. They went there, inside the house and went nuts. There was a cow's skull nailed to the doorway. There were symbols all over the place, someone had carved them into the walls, floor, and ceiling. A lot of bird remains were laying on the floor, some of them quite fresh.